Good evening, everybody. I want to start tonight by asking you a simple question, not a complicated one, a simple one. But I want you to really think about it before you answer. How much do you think you're worth? Now, I'm not talking about your bank account. I'm not talking about your job title or your car or the house you live in. I'm talking about something much deeper than that. I'm talking about the value you place on you. The person waking up in your skin every single morning, making decisions, doing the work, carrying the weight. Here's what I've learned after all these years, and I want you to write this down. You cannot give away what you do not first possess. You cannot give love you don't have. You cannot give confidence you don't own. And you cannot give value to your family, your work, your community, your future, if you haven't first decided that you are valuable. See, so many of us were taught to put ourselves last, take care of everybody else first, serve everybody else's dreams first. And that sounds noble, it sounds humble, but let me tell you something. A candle doesn't lose anything by lighting another candle. But you are not a candle. You are the fire itself. And a fire that gives away all its heat with nothing left to burn goes out. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that isn't selfish. It's essential. We're going to talk about why the most important relationship you will ever build, negotiate, and maintain is the one with yourself. Because here's the truth. The world will only value you to the exact degree that you value yourself first. So tonight's topic is simple, but it will change your life if you let it sink in. Value yourself first. Let's get started. Let's talk about the first keynote, because everything else we discuss tonight depends on you understanding this one thing all the way down to your bones. You cannot give what you do not have. Now, that sounds simple. It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? But most simple truths are the ones we skip right over because we think, well, that's obvious. And then we go live our whole lives forgetting the obvious thing. Let me ask you something. Have you ever met somebody who was running on empty, bone-tired, worn thin, giving everything they had to their job, to their kids, to their spouse, to their church, to their community, and yet somehow nothing they gave seemed to land? Nothing seemed to stick. People around them were still hungry, still hurting, still waiting for something more. I've met people like that. I used to be somebody like that. And here's what I finally figured out. After years of trying to pour from a cup that had nothing in it, you cannot give away what you do not first possess. Not love, not confidence, not wisdom, not peace, not value. If it's not in you, it cannot come out of you. It's not a matter of trying harder. It's not a matter of gritting your teeth and pushing through. It's a matter of arithmetic. You cannot subtract from 0 and expect a positive number. Think about a well that has been dug down deep, down into the water table, down into that cool, clean, abundant source. That well can serve an entire village. People come with their buckets day after day, year after year, and the well just keeps giving. Why? Because it's connected to something deep. It has a source. But a well that was dug halfway, a well that never reached the water, you can lower 100 buckets into it. You can turn the crank 1,000 times. Nothing comes up. Not because the people are lazy, not because they don't care, but because there's nothing down there to draw from. Now, here's my question for you tonight. How deep is your well? Because I meet so many good people, hardworking people, well-meaning people who are exhausted from lowering the bucket into a well that ran dry a long time ago. They keep cranking, they keep showing up, they keep telling themselves, I just need to try harder, give more, sacrifice more. But the problem was never effort. The problem is they stopped digging into their own source. They stopped valuing themselves long enough to refill what they were constantly pouring out. I want you to understand something about how life actually works, not how we wish it worked. Love, patience, wisdom, generosity, confidence, these are not bottomless resources that magically appear because you have good intentions. They are resources, and resources have to be replenished. You have to tend to the source. Now let me bring this down to earth, because I don't want to leave you with a nice metaphor and nothing to do with it. If you don't value your own time, you will let everybody else spend it for you, and at the end of the day, you'll have nothing left to invest in the things that actually matter to you. If you don't value your own mind, you'll stop feeding it, stop reading, stop learning, stop growing, and then one day somebody will ask for your wisdom, and you'll discover the shelf is bare. If you don't value your own health, your own rest, your own spirit, you'll keep writing checks against an account that has no more deposits coming in. And eventually, and this is a promise, not a threat, eventually, that account is going to bounce. I've watched it happen. I've watched good parents burn themselves down to nothing trying to raise great kids, and the kids grow up watching a parent who is depleted, anxious, resentful, and that becomes the model of love they inherit. Not because the parent didn't care enough, because the parent gave from an empty well and called it sacrifice, when really it was just neglect turned inward. I've watched leaders do the same thing in business, pouring out strategy, vision, energy, encouragement to their teams year after year, while never investing a single dollar or a single hour back into their own growth, their own health, their own thinking, and then they wonder why their leadership feels thin, why their people sense something is missing. It's because you cannot lead people to a place you have never given yourself permission to go. So let me say this as plainly as I know how. Taking care of yourself first is not the enemy of generosity. It is the engine of it. This is not about becoming selfish. Let's be very clear about that distinction, because somebody in this room is thinking, well, that sounds like an excuse to be self-centered. No. Selfishness is hoarding the water and letting the village go thirsty. What I'm talking about is digging the well deep enough that the water never runs out, so you can serve for 40 years instead of 4. So you can give your best year after year instead of giving everything you have in year 1 and having nothing left for year 2. The people who changed the world, the great parents, the great leaders, the great friends, the people whose names you remember because of how much they poured into you, those people were not running on empty. They had learned, sometimes the hard way, to fill themselves first, not out of vanity, out of wisdom, because they understood something most people never stop long enough to learn. You are the instrument through which everything else in your life gets built. Your family, your career, your dreams, your contribution to this world, all of it flows through you. And if the instrument is broken, cracked, neglected, running on fumes. Everything that flows through it comes out thin, comes out strained, comes out incomplete. So tonight, I want you to stop asking, how can I give more, for just a moment. I want you to ask a better question first. What have I been withdrawing from a well I never bothered to refill? Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your peace of mind. Maybe it's your own belief in yourself. Whatever it is, that's where the work begins. Not because you're selfish for tending to it, but because everyone in your life is depending on you having something to give them. And you cannot give what you do not have. Fill your well first. Then let the whole village drink. Now, let's move to the second keynote, because this one clears up a confusion that keeps a lot of good people stuck for years, sometimes their whole lives. Self-worth is not selfish. It's the foundation of service. I want you to sit with that word for a second. Selfish. It's a heavy word, isn't it? It's been used on most of us at some point, maybe by a parent, maybe by a church, maybe by a culture that confused humility with self-erasure. Somebody, somewhere, taught us that thinking well of yourself, taking care of yourself, putting yourself on your own list of priorities, that this was a character flaw, that the good people, the noble people, the people who really matter, are the ones who disappear into everyone else's needs and never ask anything for themselves. Now, I want to challenge that. Not because I don't believe in service. I believe in service more than almost anything. I've built my whole life around helping people become more than they were. But I learned something along the way that took me a long time to understand. Service without self-worth isn't virtue. It's a slow leak. Let me explain the difference, because it matters. Selfishness says, I will take from you so that I have more. Selfishness is extraction. It's a person who hoards, who takes credit, who steps on others to climb higher, who never gives unless there's something in it for them. That is selfishness, and I am not talking about that tonight. I want to be very clear about that, but valuing yourself, that's a different animal entirely. Valuing yourself says, I matter enough to take care of so that I have something worth bringing to the table. That's not extraction. That's preparation. And here's the part people miss. Preparation always precedes contribution. Always. You do not get to skip that step. Think about the people who have given you the most in your life. Think hard about them. I'd be willing to bet that the ones who gave you the most real wisdom, real encouragement, real love that actually helped you grow were not broken down, resentful, depleted people. They were people who had something. They had confidence. They had peace. They had a sense of their own worth that didn't come from you needing them. And because they had it, they could afford to give it away. That's the part nobody tells you. A person who does not value themselves cannot value you the way you deserve either, because value works like currency. You cannot hand somebody $100 bill out of an empty wallet. You cannot tell someone you matter, you're worthy, you're capable with any real conviction if you don't believe that about yourself first. Oh, you can say the words. People say the words all the time, but people don't remember your words nearly as much as they remember what you modeled. And if what you modeled was self-neglect, self-doubt, and constant self-sacrifice with a side of quiet resentment, that's the inheritance you're passing down. no matter how kind your words were. So here's what I want you to consider when you value yourself, when you rest, when you need rest, when you set a boundary that protects your peace, when you invest in your own growth, when you say, I am worth the effort it takes to become better. You are not stealing from the people you love. You are investing in what you're going to hand them later. You're not being selfish. You're being responsible. There's a difference between a farmer who eats all the seed and a farmer who plants some of it back into the ground. So there's a harvest for everybody next season. Valuing yourself is planting the seed back into the ground. It looks like it's for you, but the whole village eats from what grows there. I want to tell you something else, and I say this with love. The martyr never actually helps as many people as they think they do. The person who runs themselves into the ground for everyone else often ends up becoming a burden those same people have to carry, physically, emotionally, sometimes financially, because they refuse to maintain themselves along the way. That's not service. That's a debt being passed down the line, dressed up in noble language. Real service, sustainable service, generational service, the kind that actually changes lives over decades, not just for a season. That kind of service comes from a person who has done the unglamorous work of valuing themselves enough to stay whole, to stay healthy, to stay growing, to stay filled. So I want you to release that old lie tonight. The lie that says taking care of you is the opposite of taking care of others. It's not the opposite. It's the requirement. It's the prerequisite. You do not have to choose between valuing yourself and serving the people you love. In fact, the moment you stop choosing between them, the moment you understand that one produces the other, that's the moment your life changes. That's the moment your relationships get stronger, not weaker. That's the moment your leadership gets more powerful, not less. That's the moment your love gets deeper, not thinner. Because here's the truth I want to leave with you on this one. The world does not need more empty people giving from nothing. The world needs whole people giving from abundance, and that starts with you deciding once and for all that valuing yourself was never selfish to begin with. It was the foundation the whole house was supposed to be built on. Now let's turn to the third keynote, and I want you to lean in for this one, because this is where the rubber meets the road. The world prices you at the rate you price yourself. I've watched this play out so many times in so many lives that I no longer consider it a theory. I consider it a law, as real and as consistent as gravity. You may not like it. You may wish it worked differently, but wishing has never yet changed a law of life. And this one is no exception. Here's how it works. The world is watching you long before it ever pays you, promotes you, respects you, or commits to you. And what it's watching for isn't your resume. It isn't even your talent, not at first. What it's watching for is the price tag you put on yourself. Because people are remarkably good at reading that price tag, even when you never say a word about it. They read it in how you carry yourself. They read it in what you tolerate. They read it in what you accept, what you settle for, what you let slide, and what you refuse to let slide. And once they've read that price tag, they will treat you accordingly. Not because they're cruel, because that's simply how markets work, and like it or not, you are operating in one every single day of your life. Let me give you a picture of this. Imagine two men selling the exact same product, same quality, same materials, same craftsmanship. One of them prices it low because deep down, he doesn't quite believe it's worth much. The other prices it high because he knows exactly what went into making it, and he's not embarrassed to say so. Now, here's what's fascinating. Most of the time, the world doesn't argue with either of them. The world simply pays what's asked. The first man spends his whole life wondering why nobody seems to value his work. The second man never has that problem, not because his product was better, but because he believed it was worth more, and he priced it that way, and the world took him at his word. That, my friends, is not just a lesson in economics. That is a lesson in life, because you are doing the exact same thing every single day, whether you realize it or not. You are pricing yourself in your relationships, in your career, in your friendships, in the way you let people speak to you or don't, in the hours you're willing to work for free and call it just being helpful, in the disrespect you absorb and explain away because you don't want to make waves. Every one of those moments is a price tag, and people are reading it. I want to tell you something that took me years to learn, and once I learned it, I never went back to the old way of thinking. Nobody is going to value you more than you value yourself. Nobody. Not your boss, not your spouse, not your friends, not the marketplace. People will occasionally try to talk you up beyond your own self-assessment for a season, but it never lasts because eventually you'll talk yourself back down to the price you actually believe, and that's the number that sticks. Now, some of you are thinking, well, that's not fair. Some people are undervalued no matter how much they believe in themselves. And I understand that frustration, the world isn't always immediately just, and it doesn't move at the speed we'd like, but over time, and I want you to really hear this, over time and with consistency, a person who prices themselves properly, who knows their worth and refuses to negotiate it away out of fear, tends to find their way to people and opportunities who will pay that price. And a person who prices themselves cheap tends to keep attracting exactly that. Cheap deals, cheap treatment, cheap commitments. It's not always instant, but it is remarkably reliable. Here's what I want you to understand about how this plays out practically. It's not about arrogance. It's not about walking into a room announcing how great you are. That's not pricing yourself properly. That's just noise, and people see right through it. Pricing yourself properly is quieter than that. It's in the boundary you hold when someone tries to cross it. It's in the standard you keep for how you're spoken to. It's in the work you refuse to do for less than it's worth, not because you're greedy, but because you understand the value of your time and your skill. It's in the way you speak about yourself when no one's grading you on it, the private conversations you have in your own head. Because that internal conversation, that's the wholesale price. Everything the world pays you later is just the retail markup on what you already decided about yourself in private. I've seen brilliant, capable people stay stuck for years, not because they lacked skill, not because they lacked opportunity, but because somewhere inside they had quietly priced themselves at a discount. They apologized for taking up space. They said yes to everything because they were afraid no would cost them the relationship. They stayed in jobs, in friendships, in situations that shrank them because some old, quiet voice told them, this is probably all you're worth, so don't push it. And the tragedy isn't that the world was cruel to them. The tragedy is the world simply agreed with the price they'd already set. And I've also seen ordinary people, not the most naturally gifted, not the most connected, not the ones with every advantage, rise further than anyone expected, simply because they refused to sell themselves cheap. They didn't demand respect loudly. They just quietly stopped accepting anything less than it. They said no to the deal that undervalued them. They walked away from the relationship that diminished them. They asked for what the work was actually worth, even when their voice shook saying it. And little by little, the world adjusted. Not because the world became suddenly generous, because the world simply started charging and paying the price that had been set. So here's what I want you to walk away with tonight. Stop waiting for the world to notice your value and hand you a fair price out of the goodness of its heart. That's not how this works. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can stop being disappointed by it. Instead, set the price first. Set it in how you speak to yourself. Set it in what you tolerate and what you don't. Set it in the standards you hold for your time, your work, your relationships, your peace of mind. Because here is the law, plain and simple. The world is not in the business of overpaying anyone. It simply pays the price it's given. So the question isn't, when will the world finally value me the way I deserve? The question is, what price have I been quietly setting, and is it time to raise it? Now we come to the fourth keynote, and I saved this one for last on purpose because it's the one that ties everything else together. Everything we've talked about tonight, filling your well, understanding that self-worth isn't selfish, pricing yourself properly, all of it depends on this final piece, and without it, none of the rest will ever take root in your life. Valuing yourself is a decision, not a discovery. You don't find it, you declare it. Now, let me tell you why I phrase it that way, because I chose those words carefully. Most people are out there searching for their worth like it's buried treasure, hidden somewhere out in the world, waiting to be found once they get the promotion, once they lose the weight, once they get the relationship, once somebody important finally notices them and says, you matter. They're combing through life with a metal detector, hoping one day it beeps and says, here it is. Here's your value. We found it. And I want to tell you tonight, that search will never end because you are looking in the wrong direction entirely. Self-worth was never a discovery. It was never something hidden out there, waiting for the right circumstances to reveal it. Self-worth is a decision. It's something you declare the same way a country declares independence. Nobody hands a nation its sovereignty. A nation stands up one day and says, we are now governing ourselves. And then it spends the rest of its history defending that declaration. That's exactly how this works for you. Here's what I mean. You do not wake up one morning having discovered that you're worthy after finally achieving enough, accumulating enough, pleasing enough people. I've met people at the very top, successful, wealthy, admired by thousands, who still don't believe they're worth much because they were waiting for an external discovery that was never going to come. And I've met people with very little, materially speaking, who carry themselves with the deepest sense of worth I've ever seen, because somewhere along the way, they made a decision about their own value and they stopped waiting for permission to believe it. That's the difference. Discovery waits. Decision acts. I want you to think about a courtroom for a second. In a courtroom, a verdict isn't discovered lying around somewhere. A verdict is rendered. Somebody stands up and declares it, and from that moment forward, it becomes the operating truth of the case. Nobody goes looking under a rock for the verdict. The jury deliberates, and then they decide, and once they decide, that decision carries the full weight of law. Your worth works exactly the same way. You are both the defendant and the jury. And most people have been letting everyone else serve on that jury. Their parents, their exes, their bosses, social media, a bad year, an unkind word said to them back when they were 12 years old that they never quite let go of. They've been letting outside voices render the verdict on their worth for years, sometimes decades, and then they wonder why the verdict keeps changing depending on who's in the room. That's not a life. That's an appeal that never ends. Tonight, I want you to dismiss that jury, every single one of them, and I want you to render the verdict yourself. Now, I know somebody's thinking, that sounds nice, but it feels artificial. How can I just decide I'm worthy when I don't feel it? And that's a fair question, so let me answer it directly, because this is important. Feelings follow decisions. They do not lead them. If you wait to feel worthy before you decide you're worthy, you will wait your entire life. Because feelings are unreliable, they shift with your mood, your sleep, your bank account, the weather, but a decision, a real decision, made deliberately and then repeated daily like a discipline, that decision eventually produces the feeling. Doesn't start with the feeling. It ends with it. Think about confidence for a second, because it's the cousin of this same principle. Nobody feels confident before they act. They act, and confidence shows up afterward, built brick by brick out of the evidence of their own action. Self-worth operates the same way. You don't wait to feel worthy and then start acting like it. You declare it, you start acting from it, and the feeling slowly, sometimes frustratingly slowly, catches up to the declaration. Let me tell you what this decision actually looks like in practice, because I don't want to leave this abstract. It looks like waking up on an ordinary Tuesday. Nothing special has happened, no achievement to point to, and choosing to speak to yourself with respect instead of the harsh, critical voice you inherited from who knows where. It looks like catching yourself mid-apology for something that needs no apology and stopping. It looks like looking in the mirror on a day you don't feel particularly impressive and saying out loud, if you have to, I am valuable. Not because of what I did today, because of who I am. It feels strange the first time. It feels almost like lying. But you keep declaring it anyway. The way that nation keeps defending its declared independence, even when other countries don't recognize it yet. Eventually, the recognition comes, but the declaration always comes first. Here's something else I want you to understand about decisions versus discoveries. a discovery can be taken away because you never controlled it in the first place. If your worth is something you discovered because someone else affirmed it, then that someone else can also take it away by withdrawing that affirmation. That's why so many people's self-worth rises and falls like a tide, depending entirely on how they were treated that week. But a decision you made that belongs to you, that nobody handed you and nobody can revoke, that's solid ground. That's a foundation you can build the rest of your life on, because it doesn't depend on the next promotion, the next relationship, the next person's opinion of you. I'll tell you plainly, I have watched people spend 20, 30 years of their life waiting for the world to discover their worth for them, waiting for enough success to prove it, waiting for enough love to confirm it. And I've watched other people simply stand up one day, sometimes with nothing Weibo having changed at all, and decide. And the ones who decided moved forward with a kind of settled strength that the ones still waiting never quite found, no matter how much they eventually achieved. So here's what I want to leave you with on this final keynote, and really on the whole evening. Stop waiting for your worth to be discovered. Stop waiting for the achievement, the relationship, the applause, the proof. You are not a treasure buried out there somewhere in your future, waiting to be dug up once you've done enough. You are the one with the authority to render the verdict right now, exactly as you are. So render it. Stand up in the courtroom of your own life, dismiss every outside jury that's ever ruled on you unfairly, and declare clearly, deliberately, and without apology, I am valuable. Not because you discovered it, because you decided it,